Hi, Martin Logan here from Erlware, and today I'm going to show you how to use OTP Base. OTP Base is our make-base build system, as opposed to Sinon, which is our flagship build system, and is a 100% Erlang solution. First thing that we need to do is go over to the OTP Base website, which is located at code.google.com/p/OTP Base. The website has a featured download section, and you're going to want to pull down the OTP Base installer version 3, save that to disk. Next, go to the Faxien package management, Erlware package management homepage, and that's located at code.google.com/p/Faxien. From there, similar to the OTP Base site, go over to the featured download section and pull down the universal launcher that was written by Dave Petikalas, who is one of our core developers. Save that to disk. Once we have these saved, pop back over to the terminal and get started. So this is a fresh machine. There's no Erl. I haven't installed from source. There's no Erlang on this machine whatsoever. So within my directory, I can see that I have Faxien Launcher Universal. That's the first thing I'm going to need to install. What this Universal Launcher is going to do is pull down the appropriate Faxien bootstrapper or launcher for our target operating system. It asks us a question first, which is enter the install prefix. We recommend user local Erlware, so I'm going to accept the default. It fetches the bootstrapper for the target operating system, which is i386, Darwin, Macintosh, the Leopard release. So here you can see it, progress bar telling us that it's pulling it down. And now we have it, and it asks us if we want to run the bootstrapper now. We do. It's untarring into user local Erlware. Faxien is installed, and now it's upgrading to the latest version. So once Faxien's installed, it goes out on the net and checks to see if there are any later versions. In this case there are, and we are now on Faxien 0.28.0.1. Now, here's something that I recommend you do permanently, which is add user local Erlware bin to your path. That way you don't have to keep typing in user local Erlware bin Faxien. So export path. I'm just going to do it temporarily here, whatever my path is currently, and I'm going to add user local Erlware bin to my path. So there's the full command. Let's enter that. Now we can type Faxien, and we get the Faxien help screen. Okay. From here, let's go and install some of the applications and releases that OTP Base is going to require. The first one is a release called Erl. So we just type in Faxien install Erl. Faxien goes out on the net, finds the latest version, which is 12.3.1, and it pulls down the compiler and the other apps, standard lib and kernel, already installed as part of Faxien. So now we have a shell, we have Erlc. So now we're going to install fslib, which provides some of the backing code. Oh, sorry. There's a difference between install and install app. Install is for installing releases, which are a collection of applications that form a service, and install app, which will pull down actual applications or pieces of code. So install app, fslib, pulling down the latest version, 1.5 or 5.1.3. fslib provides some backing code that OTP Base requires. We already have GAS installed as part of Faxien. GAS is generic application services, so let's just upgrade that to make sure that we have the latest. And again, it's upgrade app, GAS. It's not a release, it's an app. We're up to date on that. And that should put us about finished for the applications that we're going to need to install in the system. Now, let's clear the screen and we can go about installing OTP Base itself and starting to build our application. So, I'm going to run the OTP Base installer version 3. First thing that OTP Base asks is to enter the location of the OTP Base install. There's a little something to consider here. By default, it's going to install into OTP Base in the current directory. There are two ways to use OTP Base. You can manage all of your applications and all of your releases in one OTP Base install, or you can use it in more of a project fashion where you have a separate install for each one of the projects that you're running or that you're writing. So I tend to use it as a, just all-encompassing. I store all my releases and all my applications in one install. There's no real preferred way to do it, whatever is your preference. So I'm going to go ahead and accept OTP Base just as is. It asks me where Faxien is installed. Where's the Erlware base install? We know that's user local Erlware. And the last thing it asks me is what is the ERTS version that I prefer right now. So when I run the shell, the ERTS version that it discovered, the ERTS version that's on our path is 5.5.5, which correlates to R11B5. That is indeed what I want to run. I'm not focusing on R12 right now. My development's going to be done on ERTS 5.5.5, so I accept the default. And OTP Base is now installed. Let's go ahead and cd into it. Run ls. You can see we have makefile, readme, build, lib, license, release, and tools. First thing we want to do is create an application. So under tools, there is a little utility called application generator. Application generator takes two arguments. The first is the name of the application. Second is a prefix. Remember that Erlang has a flat namespace, so it's quite helpful to prefix all of the files within an application with something so that you don't run into name clashes with other applications. And we've just generated our application. Let's cd under lib. We can see now that we have a makefile and we have this test directory. cding into test. Within test we have makefile, include, source, and version.mk. Version.mk, if I cat that, contains the version of our application. When you want to up the version of your application, edit this file, and that'll be taken into account by the make. The include file, or the include directory, contains test.hurl, so basically a hurl file of the same name as your application. And let's get into the source directory, which contains makefile, test.app.source, test.appup.source. If you're familiar with OTP, you know exactly what app files do and appup files do. If you're not, don't worry, OTP Base takes care of this stuff for you. You're not really going to have to mess with this. So let's just get into writing the application. I'm going to create a file called test.erl, and this is going to be my, let's call it ts app.erl. So there's a prefix. This is going to be the app file for, or the application start file for my application. I'm running the Erlware mode, which is the Erlang mode for Emacs, currently written and maintained by Dave Petikolas, one of our core developers. It's quite useful. I can pop open the menu, grab Erlang, jump into skeletons, select application, and now I have an application skeleton that provides me with all of the interface functions that I'm going to need, nicely edocked. And this one's compilable right out of the box, so for purposes of the demonstration I'm going to do nothing more to it but save it, exit, and let's just go back to our base directory and type make. I can have typed make in the application directory. I can type make anywhere I want. So we see we are compiling and we've now built our application. And remember, we did not install Erlang from sources on this. This is entirely taken care of by installing the Erl release via Faxien and a couple of the apps like fslib that we installed earlier. Now that we've created an application, we're ready to go ahead and create a release. A release is basically a pulling together of applications, config, and startup scripts or executables in order to create a standalone Erlang service. So we've got our test application over on the lib side, And on the release side, or under the releases directory, we're going to create a release, and to do that, we're going to use tools, release generator, and then we just pass that a release name. I'm going to call this one test server, and I'm going to call it test server and not test to illustrate the fact that releases are different from applications. So let's create test server. Now we can see that that's been placed under release test server. Let's cd into that directory. Within here we can see that we have makefile, testserver.config.source, testserver.rel.source, testserver.source, and vsn.mk. vsn.mk is going to contain the version of our release. Anytime you want to bump the version of your release for packages, simply bump the version in this file, do a make clean, run make again, and everything will have picked up the new version. Let's take a look at some of these files. testserver.config.source. Well, one thing you'll notice is that a lot of those files have the .source prefix, or suffix. That suffix will be removed, and a file of the name that's the same as the source file without the source suffix will be generated after the make process. The reason for that is there are different contexts that these files get put in, and we'll explain that later. But after the make process, these OTP-based variables will be filled in. So back to the config.source file. config.source is going to create your release config file when it's all done, and OTP Base provides some boilerplate for you that you're free to get rid of, but that I think you'll find pretty helpful. The first is the SASL configuration. This gives you SASL error logging right off the bat, so that when you go to start up your release and it fails, you can see why. If there's a failure in the OTP base or in the OTP subsystems, you'll see exactly why within the SASL log. Below that, we have some configuration provided by Generic Application Services, or GAS. This configuration uses one of the FSLib applications, FSLib modules, in order to provide error logging, rotation, and truncation, which is also very helpful. You're not going to blow out your log DIRs. This also logs truncates and wraps SASL logs. And then below here, you would put your own release configurations on a per application basis. Quitting that, let's jump into the testserver.rel.source. What this is a place where we can specify the applications that make up the release that we are creating. So this particular release is going to be called test server. The version will be populated from vsn.mk. We're going to include ERTs, of course, all releases will. We're going to include the kernel, standard lib, SASL, eUnit, FSLib, GAS, and then of course we just wrote an app called test, which is going to form the heart of this particular release, so we'll add that. Quitting, testserver.src or testserver.source I'm not going to take a look at right now. I'll explain that later, but that's basically going to create the binary executable file, or in this case script, for your package if you choose to create one. So let's go ahead and run make. The warnings tell us that we basically have a little bit of clock out of sync problems from the machine that this code was pulled from and the machine I'm running on now. Not a big deal, something we can ignore entirely. Now we see we've generated an extra directory, local. If we jump in there, we see that we have a lot of the same files we had before, except they're missing the .source suffix. So let's take a look at our config first. Now you can see that SASL logger is populated and that we're going to be logging into OTP Base, release, test server, local, log directory, version of our release, and then we're going to fill out a file called testserver.saslog. And that's going to be rotated and truncated by the following code, which is right here. And we can also see that this code specifies our error log, which is going to sit side by side with our SASL log and be rotated and truncated as well by fselwrap_h. And again, if you don't want this, just get rid of it. Now, let's take a look at testserver.rel. So testserver.rel looks much like our rel.source file, except that the versions of the applications, or the highest versions of the applications found, have been filled in. So we specified kernel standard libs, SASL, gas, test, etc. This will be populated and filled in by applications both from our Erlware install location, so the place we installed Faxien. Any applications that we install using Faxien will be picked up, as well as any applications that are under development over on the lib side, or the lib directory of our OTP Base installation. So let's quit that. And last thing we take a look at in local is testserver.sh. And testserver.sh basically uses Erl, which is located in our SASL or our Faxien install location under the bin directory. It creates a dummy name for this based on the username of the person running the machine, and it calls the boot file, which sits in this local directory, and passes it the test server config. What the boot file is is an extension of the rel file. So the rel file specifies the applications that are to be started as part of the release. A script file is then generated, which is a human-readable version of exactly where those applications sit, and then the boot file is the binary version of that, which brings together all the applications on the system, loads them up onto an Erlang runtime system, and basically comprises or makes up our release. Now, the next thing we want to do is this local version is great for taking a look at our release in interactive mode. So next thing we want to do is start it up, testserver.sh, and you can see that we've fired up a shell. This shell is essentially the test server application. It's up and running. We didn't do anything with it. We created kind of a dummy application over on the other side. Had we put code and logging and whatnot in there, we'd see that right here. Right now our application is just kind of sitting, but this interactive shell is not just running a dummy Erl shell, it's actually sitting on a VM that is our release, or is running all the applications that we've specified in our release. So this is great for testing and interactively debugging as you're developing your particular application for your release. Let's exit that. Now let's say that we've finished. We've got this wonderful release. We've been in local and debugging and developing, and it's finally working and it's ready for the big time. It's ready for production. We can say make package. And what that does is, if we run ls, you can see we have test server-1.0. I'm going to cd into test server-1.0. And I have a bin directory, a lib directory, and a release directory. Let's list the lib directory first. The lib directory contains compiled versions of all the applications that we've specified as part of our release. Listing the bin directory, we've got the test server, which was generated from testserver.src, and in bin test server we've got some scripted code that knows how to fire up our application within the Faxien context. So the reason for creating this is so that we can use Faxien to either publish this application to remote repositories so that other people will be able to just say Faxien install test server, similar to the way we did Faxien install Erl, or we can use Faxien install here to install this local copy right on our machine, essentially deploying it and making it ready for production. We might also presumably tar this up, copy it to other servers on our network, and say Faxien install that particular tar file on those other servers in order to install it there in the appropriate location for production. Faxien itself will take care of handling the ERTS version, or handling ERTS on those particular machines if they are of a different architecture. The last thing to notice is the releases directory, version, and in here we've got config and rel. The boot and script files are not here because when you do install a release package with Faxien, it will generate the boot and script files on a per system basis. So let's go ahead and do that. Faxien install test server -1.0. There we go. Hit enter, and we get OK. Now, if I say which test server, because I've added this to my path, I have user local Erlware bin test server. If I say test server, I have just started a standalone Erlang daemon running in detached mode, so it's a daemon that's now running on my system and ready to do whatever it is it was designed to do. And lastly, if I were to want to put this out to the world, Faxien publish test server -1.0 and hit enter, and Faxien is going to ask us to create a control file, which is going to be the owner of the package's name, the email address, and then basically some categories that it sits in. So our test server is going to be a tool for testing. So I'm going to type in tool, test for our categories. I'm not going to specify any additional control info. And now Faxien goes ahead, tars that up, and publishes it out to the repositories. And there we go. There you have it. There is the full development cycle with OTP Base, from installing it to creating an application, a release, and finally publishing that out to the world or installing it for production purposes on your own local machine. Thank you very much, and happy developing.